And welcome everyone to the Shitlord Preachers podcast. This is episode 19 for us. Sorry we've been off the air for a couple weeks here. We've been Brooke is my co-host here has been in transition back to the UK from Trinidad, so we've been kind of working on that. But today we are going to have a guest. Chris, he's having some technical difficulties, so we're going to see how that pans out. But we wanted to at least get started to at least get the stream going. So, once again, this is the Shitlord Preachers podcast. My name is Amos Joseph. I'm joined by Brook Potter, who is now in London in the UK.
London.
Yeah.
What number is this, Amos? Have we reached the 2-0 mark?
No, we got one more to go. It's 19.
Oh, 19. That's so close and yet so far. Fantastic.
Basically the behind the name Shitlord Preachers is basically Brook Potter and I used to be preachers, and what had happened was as we were sort of seeing a lot of the stuff we saw in being preachers, a lot of the cognitive dissonance, the way we were sort of being red pilled by some stuff. We kind of got away from that, but then as we saw a lot of stuff in politics and just culture in general, we started seeing a lot of the same things. So being kind of around the idea of being shit posting but also being, talking about politics and such, we are the Shitlord Preachers. But I'll let Brooke introduce himself a little bit here. Let us know what's going on with him.
Thank you, Amos. Good day, everyone. Yes, I am Brook Potter, originally from the Twin Island nation of Trinidad and Tobago, of which I've recently returned to London in the UK. And it's cold. It's like really cold out here. I do apologize for the mess that's behind me. I've come back with a bunch of baggage and stuff like that. My room simply cannot contain all of the chaos that has been unleashed. But yeah, as Amos is saying, we used to be ministers and stuff like that, and seeing, a lot of the political discussions and some of the cultural things that are going on, especially with the far left or the regressive left, and the surgence of socialism and just a lot of misinformation out there. We would get into some great discussions that we felt we would share with like-minded people and even people who don't agree with us, and just have these great discussions online. And as I said, I thought we almost hit 20. We got one more to go, so that's a priority. We got to do something special, get the Happas, Bunty King, Sargon. We'll have a celebration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah,
interviewed by the BBC by Kathy Newman. Or what's her name?
So what you're saying is
That's Channel 4, I think. Yeah, that's it.
What you're saying is we're so popular that we deserve to be interviewed by Kathy Newman.
Damn right.
So basically, we were, like I said, we're having Chris from Think Liberty, who's joining us in the stream. Like I said, he's having some technical difficulties, so we're going to wait and see what's going on there. He lives like in the middle of nowhere, so it's probably a little tricky to try to get connected. But kind of one of the things we're thinking about, we talk about until he can get his thing figured out is what is this Chinese dress controversy?
Yeah.
Well, it's called a cheap hao.
Oh, is that the proper Chinese name for it?
Yeah, cheap hao. I don't know what it roughly translates to, but I mean it's a very traditional dress. And so for those of you,
put links to it below. Yeah.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, there was a girl who went to prom wearing a Chinese style dress called a cheap, in accordance with the style of what's called a cheap hao in Chinese. And some Chinese Asian guy, he's probably not even Chinese, basically retweeted her, and said, my culture is not your prom dress. And well,
I didn't think he would be really thrilled wearing a dress, but okay.
So, sparked a whole controversy about cultural appropriation. How this is offensive, how because from what I saw, she was tan. I mean, she's probably mixed, but she was, as you could see, she was not.
Oriental.
She wasn't. She didn't have any Oriental, going on there. So, um, it got so interesting that let me, because I'm going to try to pull up a picture of this just so we could get an idea of kind of what she looked like. See, and I type in Google "my culture," and it instantly shows up.
The Google machine is listening to our conversation.
Exactly. So
we are talking through YouTube. So
exactly. So I'll pull this up here quick just to. So yeah, I mean, this is what's kind of going on here. So it says, "My culture is not your prom dress." U.S. teens, qipao, sparks cultural appropriation row on Twitter. So you can see here, she's kind of like a little bit to darker skin. So I'm guessing maybe some Latin American mix. But so she's here in
Utah.
Utah, looks like. Yeah, it says here. So 18-year-old Kazaya, who's not Chinese, posted pictures of herself wearing a cheongsam or qipao. I think, yeah, maybe there's some sort of, I guess, crossover on that. The terms for her prom last week. The debate basically started with this guy Jeremy Lamb. Yeah. Lamb, as far as I know, is not a Chinese name. So
yeah, it can be.
I guess it depends.
Lamb. I think he was an actor.
Okay, so it says, yeah, so basically he had 41,000 retweets and 177,000 likes. And then her original tweet had 5,000 retweets and 84,000 likes. So
right. Well, we know the political atmosphere on Twitter tends to lean left, so that's not entirely surprising.
So you can see here he's, posting his thing he's in Salt Lake City. Doesn't say where she is though. But basically, and see, she even got a blue check mark out of all this, so I think it's kind of good.
There you go.
So,
I mean, what I liked about this whole thing is, at first she's like, "It's just a dress. Get over yourselves," and she refused to delete the pictures. Like all the heat that she got. At first, she was very kind of like, "This is just my thing," and then she actually put out an apology. Saying, "Look, if you're a friend, but she's not going to take the pictures down." And that is what got her like national, praise.
Oh yeah, she went on Fox News and everything too.
Oh, did she? I didn't even know that. I know Ben Shapiro kind of called her out hero of the day or whatever.
I mean, Fox and Friends is kind of jumping into that social media scene where they're just bringing on anybody. They're kind of bringing. They're kind of jumping on the bandwagon.
Then we have a shot.
Exactly. So you're saying there's a chance?
There's a chance.
Exactly. So, and so,
I mean, what is your view on that whole thing then? Like, do you want Asians and Caucasians not to mix?
No, wear whatever the fuck you want. I mean. The thing that there was a lot of studies that were done around this too. Like this sparked a conversation, which is, it's fine. You want to have a conversation, but it sparked a conversation regarding how to approach like this cultural appropriation nonsense. Like,
right.
I mean, cultural appropriation is such a nonsense thing. It's applied anywhere from like wearing a prom dress to white people getting dreadlocks. And it's. Where it really went nuts was there was all this talk about some people really started looking into the history of this dress and Chinese culture and all this. And what it came down to really was it's a dress. Chinese people wear it. And that's really it. I mean, it doesn't matter who wears it. Like I think some news organizations, like, or even some independent sources kind of went out to, there was some independent person that like went out to the streets of China and just straight up asked them, "Do you think this is okay?"
Yeah.
Showing them this. And they're like, "Great. Yeah. Like
totally.
Whatever way the culture is being spread and appreciated, go for it."
And I mean, it wasn't like she's an unattractive girl or, she was wearing it when, she's like an Amy Schumer out of shape and disrespecting the fabric.
And see, here's the thing: even if she was,
Right.
it wouldn't have mattered. Now,
Probably not.
you know, cultural appropriation. It can go in a very other directions too. It's always where a white person does something. It's never when someone does something about a white person. I mean,
Correct.
any non-white American doing anything in America, I could
Right.
just claim that's cultural appropriation.
It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, in the same logic, well, or what was it? Who invented the car? German? There was a German guy that invented the car. I think it was a
The first
German.
automobile, yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't a German guy. I can't remember his name.
Yeah. I'm cultural appropriating by driving my car.
Technically speaking, yeah.
Yeah. But no one, I mean, come on. Like, really?
I mean, Hitler drove in the first Volkswagen Beetle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right.
See, he wasn't called, hey,
BMWs.
he is more PC than we are.
Yeah, BMWs used to make Luftwaffe airplane that bombed the UK. Now we drive their cars, right? So, I mean, this the cultural appropriation thing is nonsense. Like, if you were to like really enforce that, all people in Japan would have to give up suits and ties because that's technically what European.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that whole dress. You'd never hear about that complaint. Um, Now I've had it in Trinidad and Tobago. We actually have this thing coming up a little bit because for those who don't know, the demographics in Trinidad is basically pretty evenly split between the African descendants and the East Indian descendants.
Right.
And we have celebrations for both, right? So we have Hindu and East Indian celebrations, and then we have African and like Orisha and Shouta Baptist sort of celebrations. And then, of course, there's the national celebrations as well. And every so often, you'll find a crossover. So you might find an African person dressed in a sari, which is the Indian dress, very traditional Indian wear, and they even partake in the dance, right? So they do like Indian dancing. They're African heritage, but they partake. And you see the reverse. You will see the Indians occasionally end up in the African dances with all of the dashikis and all of the fabrics and stuff like that. Now I think that's great, but they do have sections of the society that don't appreciate it and actually think it's the problem.
Right.
And I mean, I don't understand that.
I mean, cultural appropriation sounds like, how would I explain? Because I was thinking about this just now. Like, cultural appropriation is basically an extension of sort of that cringe you get when you see someone trying to do something that's part of your culture and they just completely ruin it. And instead of just like, hey, like,
Okay.
but like, for example,
like eating a chopstick and then they stab the meat.
Yeah. You just kind of go, dude, you're not doing it right. It's taking that sort of minor offense to the nth degree and saying, now you are disrespecting my culture. And it's like, no, you're just not quite.
You're not good at this.
You're just not good at it. So
right.
they've applied that to, now it's sort of, it's not really even just like, taking ownership of your culture. It's really just saying like for people who claim to be multicultural and America's this big melting pot, they seem to be very discriminatory against who is doing what with what culture,
Correct.
The logic doesn't quite play out either way. You have kind of, yeah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It makes no sense. I mean, as you say, it's mostly directed towards white people. As I say, I have seen it in some of like the diehard African tribe and the East Indian tribe. The real solidarity groups. They raise a fuss in Trinidad every so often. But I mean, there was a story about Heidi Klaus, who is this model. I think Black Pigeon Speaks actually did a video about this, and she was actually photographed in Japan wearing the kimono, the traditional Japanese wear, the big fabrics and stuff like that.
Major cultural appropriation.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, multiple photographs with sumo wrestlers and Bushido samurai looking characters. I mean, I didn't see all of that. I think that I might be exaggerating a little bit there, but
Just a little bit.
she did do a beautiful photo spread highlighting the Japanese culture. And the BuzzFeed Japan, which is, I guess, ass cancer sushi style, tried to explain to the Japanese people why this was inappropriate. And thank God, the Japanese were like, this doesn't make any sense. She represented the culture beautifully. The images were stunning. She did, I mean, Heidi Klum is a model, right? She's basically a glorified clothes hanger, right?
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have any say in it. She does what the photographer says, and that's her job. And for her to receive that kind of ire from people in the West, not even the Japanese. The Japanese didn't care. They thought it was great. But for the typical bleeding hearts that are offended on behalf of people who aren't offended for themselves, they kicked up a fuss, and it was the most ridiculous thing.
I wonder if there could be a term called offense appropriation.
That's what they do.
You're appropriating my offense on my behalf when I don't really even care.
I mean, that is exactly it's happening here in the UK with the Dankula case, right? So, the judge ruled that Count Dankula was guilty for gross offense, that for saying something that is offensive to, the religious and the Jewish community.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is nobody in the Jewish community complained, right? Nobody actually came
for
forward.
how much actual anti-Semitism that Jews receive in the world.
Yes.
Count Dankula's video had to have been almost the absolute bottom of even coming close to being like seriously, like something to take seriously.
It's not even on the scale because he had Jewish comedians and Jewish people came out to support him at the trial. But it's exactly what you said. The judge is being offended on behalf of a community that isn't even offended by the action. And it's become fucking law.
We got to do something on that. Offense appropriation.
That is exactly what's going on. And you see it all the time. These groups and so forth, especially in the US and stuff. Many of the people don't care. Like, I've seen so much outrage about Trump and, speaking about, oh yeah, he hates Latinos and he hates minorities and all this other kinds of stuff. Of course, none of that is substantiated, but it's a bunch of white people speaking on behalf of the minorities, right? Because of course,
I've seen posts like on Facebook and stuff, and someone like, I guess, it was a while ago. Someone posted something, and they were talking about Asians. Oh, they said, yeah, it's a white person is saying, they're driving home or something, driving somewhere, and they're listening to the radio, and they heard the guy in the radio make some borderline, maybe, we'll just call it like a racial comment, not racist, but just if you, anyways, made a comment about Asians,
right.
And she proceeds to write out this post like she's offended, and I'm like. So I commented, I said, and she's white, and I commented, I said, well, have you asked an Asian person if that's offensive?
Right.
And I was like, I said, I'm so tired of people being offended on behalf of other people.
Correct.
Like, it's just, I mean, that was like the beginnings of me really understanding that idea, but it's just like, I'm watching these videos where, so the comedian Norm Macdonald?
Not sure. That doesn't sound too familiar.
If you look him up,
stand up,
did movies, and did TV shows. And he's just kind of one of those comedians that was a little bit old, just didn't very non-PC.
Right.
And so there was a compilation of him, talking about different things, and there's these people that are like laughing and like, how could you say that? And I'm hearing like the comments he makes. I mean, comedians, like I'd say good comedians are the ones that don't care about PC. So they'll make jokes about, I mean, they're not going to be like gross and tasteless, but they're going to make some jokes that are definitely pushing that line big time. And he's
Sure.
making these jokes, and they're these more PC-ish comedians are on, like, he does a podcast, he's done these shows, and these people are just offended. And I'm like, I mean, to the point, like, the white guilt, you can just see the white guilt kick in. And I'm like, how can you be so offended for someone else? Like, that has to be such a miserable place to be in.
Yeah.
To be
Yeah.
so offended for others.
Yeah. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations, because
I mean, it's miserable enough to be offended
yeah.
on your own.
Yeah.
Then you gotta add on and be offended for another person who you don't even know is offended.
Correct. And the reason is because they're too stupid or too blind or whatever to understand why it's offensive. So
Yeah.
it's the soft bigotry of low expectations, right? So somebody's outraged on behalf of the Japanese in the case of Heidi Klaus, or this girl Kezia on behalf of the Chinese. Because why? Because the Chinese people are too stupid, or the Japanese people are too stupid to understand apparently this is wrong. And that's why these white people and these social justice warriors jump on it, because
And really,
those
when it
people
comes
need their
to
help.
it, if a white person has to explain to the so-called minority about why they should be offended, who's really the oppressor in this situation?
Exactly. Who's really racist? I mean, you're stereotyping people, not understanding things based on race, and you're placing yourself as superior.
Yeah.
So it's actually a form of white supremacy, as the case might be.
That is really interesting.
That's a really messed up point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my god, these people are ridiculous. But it's good. It's like a couple years ago, in Jamaica. Like every year in Jamaica, you guys wouldn't know this, but there is the Jamaican dancehall queen competition, right? And it's basically a chance. It's a big reggae party, dub party, and well, for those who don't like Caribbean music and stuff like that. And it's basically an excuse for these girls to go up there and to behave as nastily as they possibly can. And at the end of the whole ordeal, somebody is crowned, like the Miss Dancehall Queen of whatever year it is, right? And it's all kind of lewd dancing, and I mean, if you think twerking is bad, you've obviously never been to a Jamaican party, but it's just like real debauchery. Anyways, it must be a good few years now, maybe more than 15 years now. A Japanese woman won the Miss Jamaica Dancehall Queen competition, right?
Oh,
And
tell me there was outrage.
I mean, there was outrage from a lot of the Jamaican women.
But it wasn't like some PC nonsense, though.
No, this was before the time of social justice and all this other kind of stuff. But I mean, yeah, there was outrage because she was Japanese. She wasn't really, from Jamaica. I could see that point. But she did all the dance moves. She jump on, skin out, and she do all the things that these Jamaican dancers do and stuff like that. And she happened to win it. And for one, I thought that was great. The Japanese tend to be very embracing of other cultures and stuff like that. There's a very big Trinidad soca music fan base in Japan about our music and our calypso and soca music, and so yeah, they embrace a lot of this stuff really openly, and they have no problems with it whatsoever. It just doesn't seem to translate to the Westerner. This kind of tolerance and this kind of my space for me, and you can't touch my stuff sort of thing seems to prevail.
I mean, maybe McDonald's should just bring all their McDonald's back to the U.S. because the rest of the world is culturally appropriating our cheeseburgers and French fries.
There you go. What about underwear? What about tampons?
I mean, I can't wear you can't wear Hanes as it's called, but it's a German brand.
Right, Hanes is German. Yeah, the Fruit of the Loom is the American one, right?
Yeah, so we can only wear Fruit of the Loom in the United States, and only white people can wear it.
No more Coca-Cola.
And you can just, I mean,
would be.
We can only drive, shitty American cars now.
Yeah, GM would love that.
Yeah. I can't drive, I can't drive a nice BMW. Nope. Nope.
Nope, no Audis, no Mercedes Benz, no
Uh,
McLarens.
what was it? BMW has a I think a plant. No, not a plant. They have some sort of a headquarters here in Minnesota in the cities. There's some building. Gotta shut that down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole idea of buildings and stuff like that, like skyscrapers,
Social
that's
construct.
yeah. Tell that to Trump.
I mean,
Would you say
you
math? Math is culturally appropriated.
I'd like to sit that really take to the logical end a lot of this stuff with a leftist and be like, well, I mean,
Yeah,
why are you
gather
so
the evidence that's necessary.
concerned with Trump's buildings? I mean, buildings, if you really look at it, it's just a social construct. Brand names, Trump University, Trump Steaks, Trump Tower, it's just a social construct. Like, why are you so offended by a social construct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're quite right.
You know. Um I mean, what if it's building fluid,
Building fluid. Non
Uh
non-binary building.
it's a non-binary building, it's built sideways. Um
I mean,
uh
speaking of Trump, though, do you think he's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize for?
oh Jesus.
Oh, Jesus. Uh,
So it's funny because the South Korean president said he should. It wasn't
yes.
just like the logical kind of thought process of what he did sort of just triggered the need for peace.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like saying, it's like if you're next to some sort of compound, or there's two factions and they're at war, and then you were outside shooting off a machine gun to make
Yeah.
them scared, then they created peace and you get the award for it.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, yeah, doesn't quite make sense, but at the same time, there have been weirder reasons to win something like that.
I mean, I'd like to know, how did Obama win it? Was it because of the new Iranian deal?
Yeah, basically trying to disarm people of nuclear stuff.
Right.
Uh,
It's something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, Trump has qualified for that on that basis because Rocket Man has decided to give up his nukes. He's reunified the continent. I don't know what China is going to do with this because the
well,
last
they have
thing China
essentially
wanted, yeah,
brought in peace. You know,
right. But the whole point, the whole reason North Korea was sustained. Now, this is a geopolitical thing. China did not want the Americans having access to so close to their border.
mhm.
So South Korea, the Americans have bases there. Of course, there was the DMZ and all that kind of stuff. So China de facto funded the North Koreans as a hedge, as a buffer between them and South Korea with the American bases, right?
Mhm.
So somewhere along the line, the money must have dried up from China, right? That's kind of the only logical answer why he would, because they supported him. Anytime he needed money, that's what they did. The other stunt he would do, of course, is then he'd threaten nuclear missiles, and then the West would spin around and send money his way, right? So those are the two fundraising actions of North Korea. So if that's
Right.
failed, China, there's something going on with China. If that is the case, something is amiss with China. That's the unseen story behind this, and I would love to know what's going to happen. But Trump has disarmed Rocket Man. He's unified. Well, it's in the process. We still see how this works out to reunify the continent, the peninsula. That
I
sounds
don't
like
think
Nobel Prize to me.
I mean, um, unification is a tricky thing.
Oh,
Uh,
hell yeah.
I mean, no, I'm just saying is the peace is definitely a good step, but in terms of I mean, to reunify, Kim Jong Un would have to give up power some way.
Yeah, I mean, it could stay north and south, but they could probably start trading and maybe allow some free market principles into the north, sort of thing. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't know what it's going to look like yet. That's the honest truth.
Or South Korea could invade. Just kidding.
No, it's possible. It's
Just, I
possible. I
mean,
mean,
literally, I mean,
that is
just
what
go,
the DMZ was for, right?
just go for it and like just shut it down, take over. I mean, it can sound kind of dangerous to try that, but I mean, you really think about how many lives can be at stake.
Yeah, but you see that the response will come from China. Like China will back up North Korea,
And
and I
that's a
mean,
problem.
you're talking like a 200 million person army, right? So all I think it's great news. I'm I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen with this. But China is the unknown in this whole scenario. The conflict was sustained for as long as it was because China didn't want the Americans that close to their borders.
Right, right.
So I don't know. Do we have any like South Korean people that we could like ask?
That's a really good question.
You should check with the Hapa ethno state. Let them tap in.
Actually, the thing
Use their
is
Hapa powers.
here's the thing. As someone who was part of the Hapa ethno state group think, no, no, I tend to be, I guess, the most knowledgeable on any real Asian issues.
Really? That's
I mean,
interesting.
the others, they're. I mean, everyone else is so much more Americanized than me. Like,
Nico is going to give you so much shit for this statement.
why?
You're now an Asian supremacist.
um,
But yeah,
but
you were saying though. Everybody else is so like American.
yeah, I mean, you saw the Hapa ethno state live stream, and everyone was just kind of. I mean, there was this guy. He's actually he goes by father of the Hapa, of a Hapa, because he's married to an Asian woman, and they've had kids. So he is one of the breeders of the Hapa ethno state. I mean, Shane and Nico they're not really too. I mean, they'll eat the food, but in terms of actual culture and like understanding history and like even being able to like talk about it on some level, the political climate of Asia,
Yeah.
not really.
Really. Right.
I mean, there's even one person in there. She's goes by what's her name? She goes by Forgotten Nationalist. She's very much a sort of American sort of nationalism kind of person. So we're not all libertarians. We actually have a mix of different ideologies,
Sure.
but it's like she's Asian, Hapa, but doesn't really like a lot of these people aren't really into their Asian side so much.
So they're being oppressed halfway.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I tell them about the
I know you talked
the
about like simplified Chinese and a couple of
simplified
others.
Chinese. Also, well, I guess Pat Sullivan. He grew up really learning about Laos, where his mother was from,
Right.
and sort of the communist regime. Talking to him about coming on the stream, talking about communism, so that would definitely be good.
That
So
would be awesome.
because
Definitely.
he's really like passionate about some of the issues regarding Laos and communism and how it's affected them. I mean, yeah. What was it? He did a whole like tweet thread about how his mother came to the States. It was like a very, very intense story. But
Right.
anyways, why are we talking about the Hapa again?
No, if they knew any Koreans that we could talk to.
Oh, right. I mean, my aunt,
Your aunt.
my aunt married a Korean.
Okay.
My mom's side.
On your mom's side? Okay.
Yeah. So she met him in Taiwan. Now they live in Australia.
Cool.
So
That's interesting.
yeah.
You want
So
to get
they
them on the stream?
uh probably not. I don't know.
Well, it's probably not a very interesting topic for a lot of people. What goes on in Asia
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it's
not
like
really.
it's it's like if your family has uh genuine history in being slave owners and you were asked to talk about slavery, you'd be like, I
I
don't
guess it
know.
depends. I mean, my family's a lot of pirates and stuff like that, so I don't have an issue with piracy.
I mean, haven't you not like when you were in Trinidad, you did some downloading of things?
Yeah, maybe, possibly.
Goddamn pirates, I tell you.
Right up to the point where I lost internet that I was stealing from my neighbor.
uh That's right. Um,
But that's island life for you, man. You can do anything out there, and you think you guys are free.
right, right. Real quick. So I just got word from Chris. He just figured out some stuff. He will be coming on shortly to he's still getting set up here, but
Cool.
you think we should go a little longer today then to at least get him to have a little bit of a
I I
conversation?
I won't be able to, so I'll have to duck out at the usual time. I have an appointment, but you guys, yeah, go ahead, man.
Ah, shit. um, anyways, yeah, the whole thing with Korea could be very interesting. I mean, it's definitely like I saw Bering do a video on that whole thing. Did you see his video on that?
No, I haven't
Ba-
seen very much recently.
Bering did a video on basically Trump winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and he said it's just hilarious. He goes, regardless of the fact if Trump wins it or not,
Right.
the fact that leftists are losing their minds hearing a third party basically saying, hey, maybe he should win. Like, all the Republicans and conservatives that voted for the guy are probably like, yeah, he should win because, like, it could totally happen. But then when the guy who's actually involved, the president of South Korea, is like, hey, Trump helped us out. He should get a peace prize for it.
Damn
Leftists
right.
losing their minds. like they're like, no, 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 he's not getting no Nobel Peace Prize. He's getting like a Nobel lying out of his ass prize.
No, the Trump derangement syndrome is just it's off the
Right.
chain.
Let's
Like, I
see.
watched some of the comments about people, talking about him winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and just the denial. I mean, just out and out, like, yeah, like this really should go to Obama, and just like all kinds of twisting of it, just not to give Trump any praise. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
It-
I'm not the biggest Trump supporter. I think he's done some good things and some bad things, but when he's done something good, you have to acknowledge when he's done it something, and I think the Peace Prize is warranted.
right. But okay. Yeah, I don't know. What do you happen to know? Like, what they actually win for it besides the little bust?
They win a medal, they win the bus, they get like $1 million or something like that. Um, yeah,
I'd like to
something like that.
see what he does with that money, just to like troll,
Well,
the
he'd probably
left.
give it away. It's
Yeah,
maybe not 1 million, but it's something up there.
right. All right, Chris, can't hear you.
Can't hear you, bro.
You got your headset? Okay.
You can hear
Uh,
him?
he can hear us, but we can't hear him.
We can't hear him.
Yeah. So, everyone that is watching, this is Chris from Think Liberty. He's just joining us right now. Uh, Figured out
Right.
through the technical difficulties.
No,
No,
still can't hear you, man.
no,
Check those
dude.
settings.
More technical difficulties.
It's tough, man. It's tough. Love the flag, bro. I gotta get a flag. Amos has got a flag on his hat. Chris got a flag behind him.
I can
I
get a
just
flag on this wall probably if I really wanted to.
Yeah. I gotta get a flag, man. I gotta think of a
I mean,
flag.
even Hyper Supremacy has a flag.
They drew one. They drew the
No,
"Don't
no,
Tread
no.
on
It's
Me"
you can
thing.
actually buy one that says it's the no step on snake.
That's funny,
It's a
man.
parody of "Don't Tread on Me," but yeah, you've seen it.
No,
Yeah,
still nothing there,
still
Chris.
nothing.
Oh, come on. That's rough, man.
Some kind of Bluetooth headset or something?
No idea. Nothing else is
Uh,
open, right? You don't have like some music thing or video thing in the background.
dang it. Because you've done this before. Sorry.
He's
um,
he's not a, oh dang, did I just he's not muted on your end, right, Amos?
nope. Let's see
Okay.
here. Let me see. And then I'm gonna unmute him.
Right. Okay. Try now.
Nope.
No, dude. Should he come out and come back in?
That's what
There
he's trying.
he is.
Um,
Oh, that's tough, man. He looked like it was going to be a good
I was like,
conversation.
dang it. Come on.
Yeah,
But
technical difficulties. It's all part of the Borg problem at Google.
yeah, oh wait, no, I thought I saw him rejoin. Yeah, so what do you think, man? Like what do you think will be the future of North and South Korea? Like actual reunification, or maybe just, sort of North Korea probably just plays catch up to become more democratic?
I think it'll be something like that. I think the unification will happen a couple years or maybe decades from now. So it's going to be they're going to do like a slow transition. But really and truly, it all depends on what China wants. If China decides to keep propping up the regime, it's going to be a problem.
Right.
You know, if China is really in the financial trouble that we kind of think it is. Oh, Chris, you there, man?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Just had to log out and go back in. So
Awesome.
It's crazy. Welcome, my friend. Welcome.
I'm glad to finally be here. So yeah, sorry about being a little bit late here.
Technical difficulties.
Yep. So
so everyone that is watching, or watching later on, this is Chris from thinkliberty.com.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about Chris. Sorry, not Chris. Well, Chris and Think Liberty. Tell us a little bit about all that.
All right. So Think Liberty was kind of started out of a whole bunch of. It started kind of out of the Great Meme War, and it was me and a whole bunch of other people kind of got together, and we wanted to create a place where we could not only share memes, but we could also make our own like opinion articles and also our commentary on different world events going on, and try to really start a brand instead of just doing our own things. And we've since started a apparel line, and this is actually one of the shirts right now. We since started apparel, and we're actually making convention circuits. Some of our people are going around to actually the libertarian state conventions, and upcoming I'll be going to the Unconvention in Omaha, and me and Caitlin will be there at the running the Think Liberty booth. So there's some stuff that people can buy, and we'll have some exclusive stuff that there's actually going to be a patch for Unconvention. So if you're going, keep that in mind. Yeah.
So what is your role with Think Liberty then, Chris?
My main role is that I run the Steemit account and also the Minds account. And if you don't know what Steemit and Minds are, they are new social media platforms that are based on cryptocurrency. And especially with Steemit, it exists entirely on the blockchain. And so I manage those accounts, and I, try to I'm kind of getting used to both of them, and trying to figure out what's the best way to kind of augment from being on Facebook and kind of working with their algorithm to working with something else's algorithm. So I'm taking posts and content that we had on our Facebook and trying to work it into Steemit and Minds.
Awesome.
I'm also a regular on the podcast, and as of late, we haven't been doing it as much, but we've done. I started up with doing Think Liberty After Dark with Kevin Shaw, who's running for state assembly in California.
Excellent.
So we started doing that and but we haven't. He's been so busy, we haven't been able to do it. So I'm glad to actually be on a live stream now instead of our own live stream. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, one of the things I guess that I was talking to Chris about, we always try to determine like what sort of topics people personally feel the most passionate about, something they really want to talk about, whether it's a wide variety of topics or it's a main sort of umbrella. Was what was it? The monopolization of
it was basically
government.
It was basically the like we started talking about like the monopolization of violence, and how for me it's like the the government would not have any control if it did not have a monopolization of violence. What do I mean by that? Well, it's illegal if you do something that I don't like. It is banned for me to say, well, you have, if you set a small fire in my front yard, it would be illegal for me to, or uncouth of me to say, well, I'm going to lock you up for 5 months and you have to pay me. You have to pay me a certain amount of money until your debt is paid off. For me to do that, well, that would be kidnapping.
Right.
But if the the government, since it has a monopolization of violence, they are the only ones that can do that and have it be right. So that's kind of what that's getting into. If and then it kind of expands to the military-industrial complex. If us together raised up enough money and we said we're going to go, we don't like the certain people doing some things over here, and we're going to go. What's that?
The state of California. You want
we don't California. Like hippies. We don't like hippies in California. So we're going to take all of these people from the Midwest, and we're going to go over there and we're going to lock up and kill these hippies. And we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. This is a hypothetical.
And scenario. The NSA just tuned in.
Yeah, if you just tuned in. We're not going to kill hippies. No, but if we said that, then of course, like people would say, well, that's ridiculous. Like, why would you want to do that? Spend all that money to, go, and then we'd have to rationalize it. We'd have to say, well, we have a vested interest in keeping the hippies from doing something. We like this certain kind of product, or we like these certain kinds of people, and hippies go against that, or they infringe on that some way, and we'd have to put out some voices out there to be like, this is this is actually rational because this and this. And so you kind of start getting into where the violence is getting rationalized and it's getting propagandized. And why is this bad though? You might ask, because some people are like, well, we need a strong state force for defense. We need it to protect the country from invaders and things like that. And it gets into it, which is good. I agree that there should be a strong force of defense. But where it gets truly evil is when, and economists talk about this, when there's really no competition within the market and it's being artificially supported by taxpayer money, which that's another thing, but we can get into that. But when it's being artificially supported, then it has a coercive hold on everybody that it affects. Who's affected by defense? Everybody, really.
Pretty much.
So it's a non-voluntary, a very coercive way to try to rationalize state violence. And then also on top of that, they do stuff that is not ethically right. So I guess that's not a brief summarization, but kind of where I stand.
So I
Yeah.
mean, Chris, are you advocating for competition in defense? Is that kind of I mean, have you given some thought to what a defense force without the state would look like?
Yeah. I've looked into it. And it's kind of what kind of brought me into like libertarianism. And David Friedman actually describes it in his book, The Machinery of Freedom. And if you don't know who David Friedman was, he's the son of Milton Friedman.
Milton Friedman. Yeah.
So it's a pretty good starter book for some people, for somebody who's looking into like, well, what would kind of a, you know, a stateless society look? And
Sure.
he kind of goes through it pretty well. There's even a part where he talks about like ride sharing, like Uber, and he wrote the book in like the late 70s. So
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But yeah.
So what would it look like?
See, here's the thing. So, it's kind of hard for one single person to predict how market forces are going to work, and that's
Sure.
kind of the idea of having a free market, is that really no one person can predict it, and so you set up, your own private apparatuses to, try to predict the market, and you have think tanks and things like this now, but with the capitalist system that we have, or semi-capitalist. So I'm thinking what it would kind of look like is basically mostly a grassroots effort. So it'd be mostly based on militias and on just guys getting together and be like, well, if China decides to invade us, we'll have weapons and defense and things like this. But it will be kind of not in a way of like, hey, we're the army, and we're defending you, and it's like, whether you like it or not, it would mostly just be people like saying, networking and being like, this is how I'm defending my property, we can do it this way. Borders and defense would become private. So the guy that lives on the border with Mexico has pretty much he has a vested interest in keeping the Mexican army from invading.
Yeah.
But so does his neighbor that lives inland.
Right.
But so did his neighbor. So they would network, people would network amongst themselves as individuals and probably be like, hey, do you want to help me defend my private border? Or do you want to, maybe give me some money to do this? Because it definitely affects you. And of course, people can network to have a more broader army and be like, yeah, I'll give money to have, this big army that would protect the border, that maybe has more assets available, or maybe an air force, because that's where it gets kind of hairy, where it's like they have an airfield with a bunch of, F-16s or B-2s or something. It's like that takes a lot of money. And so I have a feeling like it would be a little bit different. But the thing is, a lot of people support a big military for defense. So I have a feeling a lot of people wouldn't have a problem giving money to it. So
I think in America that's probably true. Not everywhere in the world, but yeah, I think the Americans, that you'll definitely have a reverence for the military. I mean, I do. I respect, the guys and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, are you familiar with the Mises Institute and their work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Ludwig von Mises. Yeah, so like Tom Wood and these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they try, like I attend the online seminars every year, and they try to tackle these same questions, like how would we do air traffic control without the state? Like how would we do, postal service, military, and all these things.
The Postal Service is actually an interesting conversation, because there was, at America's infancy, there was actually competing postal services.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, there's the Pony Express, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There was, and Benjamin Franklin, I think, actually owned one. And
really? That's interesting.
Yeah, he was Postmaster General.
Yeah, he was but then they made him Postmaster General, and it was considered like a federalized thing very soon after. I think that was in Jefferson's administration, actually. But yeah, and so I imagine there was a little bit of contention there, like, you're destroying my business, dude.
I wonder if, like, the way people ask the question regarding roads. If they would, I mean, with the conversation, I've never had the
Who would
conversation.
send the mail?
Yeah, well, who would send the
Who
mail?
would send the mail?
And we can kind of see it like, we have like UPS, but that's like the United Parcel Service. They don't send mail; they send packages.
No, they send mail.
But it's like it's a weird area of like that they don't send mail,
post,
but they sell.
Yeah, because I had worked at a store a while back, and you get like a letter thing. They basically just called it letter, and you'd put it in, and you could ship it anywhere, like in a day.
Yeah,
it's UPS.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So you would send a letter, like people, like businessmen that really needed to get some sort of memo or something to someone quicker than the post office.
Overnight delivery sort of thing.
Yeah. And you can do that with anything, really. But I mean, it was always faster, guaranteed. And if it's not guaranteed, you have to like. I mean, part of the job was if we would track certain packages that were en route, and if a package didn't make it on time and there was no weather events that could have prevented it from getting there on time, basically like it just straight up didn't make it there the guaranteed time, we were required to call back the customer and ask them if they want a refund.
Wow, that's good.
Catch it before they kind of go, oh, you missed it, I want a refund. We would call them, hey, we found out. Yeah.
Which that makes sense because it's like it's highly in your interest that they get it. And so you're not basically relying on someone else to do it and, that sort of thing. So
like with the post office, you kind of have a time frame in your head.
Yeah.
But there is always a chance your letter is lost completely.
Yes.
Or shows up a couple decades late.
Yeah.
It has happened.
Right. Yeah. And then so that kind of is like, if you guys do you guys have any questions about anything that
when you were talking about like private sort of companies, a word popped in my mind, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on it. I just thought Blackwater.
Yeah, right. a lot of people go to that go to companies like Blackwater, which there's a lot of private military contracting companies. There's I think hundreds of them, that all do different things, not necessarily just focused on having soldiers, like Blackwater, and so the interesting thing about Blackwater is that they've changed their name and they've rebranded, but they are very controversial because they've done some things that national militaries can't do, and supposedly, and so they might have had some human rights violations and things like that. Well, here's the thing: who's paying them? The government, so to do those things. And so yes, there's messed up people in the world, and they'll do messed up things for money, but it all goes back to is it truly private if their main customer or their only customer is a coercive state that wants to get certain things done. So it's just it kind of falls into that myriad where I think it's not necessarily apples to oranges, but it's more like I don't think it's a fair comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I even talked to I was actually having a conversation with some people yesterday in a Discord server. We were talking about somehow we started talking about aliens.
Okay.
No, it ties in. Ties in. So we were talking about space exploration, and there were some people that were kind of for this position well, we're just going to go to Mars because we always expand. And I thought, because you got people like Elon Musk, and then I was see, because Elon Musk has this persona, everyone's oh, he's like Tony Stark. Well, in the comic book world of Tony Stark, he just has money, just unlimited money. He can do whatever he wants, and make a suit. And there's, forget the market, forget, capitalism.
Economics.
Yeah, economics. He just does his thing. And then, so people kind of think of the same way with Elon Musk, we're going, he wants to send people to Mars. Yeah. Do you know how much money this guy gets from the government?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, but like Tesla, but like this, but like that. I said, yeah, I think the guy has, some pretty good ideas, but he throws out ideas, never truly follows through with one to make it actually viable, profitable, and in the best interest.
The solar panel shingles, and how that was like going around on Facebook and everybody was freaking out about it. And it's been making its rounds on social media for I think almost 2 years now. Has anyone seen this happen? And if they said they said it was like, oh, it's going to be cheaper. So has anybody re-roofed their house in these shingles? I want to know.
Right. And so I brought some of this up. I was like, do you know why we went to the moon? We didn't go to the moon because human nature and it'd be cool. Like, that's all great. Like, I'm an idealist when it comes to like space exploration, and Brooke knows this. But
well, I'm a fan of Star Trek, so yeah.
Yeah, but then I come back,
sentiments towards that.
But then I come back to it, and I'm like, do you know why we went to the moon? Because the Russians.
Beat the Russians.
Exactly. And so like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he made this joke. He said someone should falsify a memo from China saying that they're going to build a base on Mars by within a decade or two. He goes, you're going to see us on Mars in 5 years. and then it's like, so I told him this, and I said, space exploration can only go so far because of. So let's say I want to go to Mars, and I design a ship that's just that solves all these problems, cosmic radiation, all this stuff. I can go to Mars, and so I got to raise money. So I get investors, and I say, all right, here's my design. It's been tested. We can do it. And they go, okay, we've got the money. What are we going to find there? Well, I don't know.
It's no return. There's no financial return. Yeah.
But then, then I said, but hold on. It'd be great to go to Mars. Great. But here's another way where a space exploration actually has an actual interest that investors could get into. Asteroid mining.
Correct.
Yep.
Now, it could really mess up with an economy because all of a sudden you've doubled the platinum supply of the planet overnight.
You could basically have like a De Beers that's in space, where like you're mining like just a ridiculous amount of platinum, or like whatever it is, or you fly to like a planet that's just entirely made out of like diamonds or gold or something.
Right. So I kind of turned this around. I was like, yeah, it'd be great. We have all these ideals. We want to like run things these ways, but you got to look at like interest, government interest, investor interest. These are things that play into, how we do these things. Like I said, if we devoted all of the resources of the planet, we could possibly make a ship that could make it to the next star 4 light years away.
Alpha Centauri.
Yeah. But
at what cost?
What is the interest? Like, there has to be a lot of factors that play into governments. Like, there would have to be a reason for us to do it.
Right. And I mean, the thing is, if there's like a market interest in it, like what you're saying, like we start mining the asteroid belt or something like that, like a company starts mining the asteroid belt and they start making, they start selling it on the Earth market. Yeah, because it would be the Earth. Yeah, they have to like think in terms of this now.
The intergalactic market,
and they start selling it, and then they're just like, oh yeah, another group of people sees this and says like, well, these guys are making just a crazy amount of money, and they're just basically just picking up their, and
the thing is
getting it, and there would be, I feel like there would be an urge for competition there as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
we're going to make better ships in the process. Private industry could make better ships to do this. And then enough people basically will be able to get a hold of these ships. Then they decide, hey, let's try Mars, because that will spur that. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's just like, we just want to go to Mars when we have only so much expansion into space. Like this, so I kind of point out this idealism of these people. I'm like, yeah, it's like we went to the moon because of the Russians, but based on your idealism, if the only reason that we just like go somewhere is because like human nature kicks in, like there's other factors of human nature. We should have a base on the moon by now, based upon your idealism.
Right. See, it's yeah, but the thing is, it kind of gets into other like philosophical. Oh, did we lose?
Yeah, he's just come back.
Okay. It gets another philosophical ideas of like, well, is that actually human nature? Because humans, I think we can agree, are pretty greedy, and they act in their own self-interest, mostly.
Right.
But this isn't necessarily bad. And so this is like an argument that like Milton Friedman and Ayn Rand and others make, is that it's not necessarily bad that people act within their own self-interest, because they end up saying, okay, well, I have this idea. How can I make a whole bunch of money off of it? Well,
Right.
if you're selling a product that you're trying to get that more people to buy that product, which means that you have to act in their interest. You have to like take their interest into consideration to be able to market it to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
you actually, out of your greed, you have a invested interest in other people's interests.
Correct.
So
To serve.
the market creates cooperation, it creates civility. So
Yeah, and the same way, it's I pointed out just a very kind of a very blanket kind of statement on it. I said, well, is there more money to be made in going to Mars, or is there more money to made in making better VR headsets? And then they kind of went, well, you can't just think. I said there are more people that are more concerned with buying a better VR headset and better games, which is totally fine, which is still cool technology. We were supposed to be on the moon right now with a base, but what did we get? The internet. It's like the market played very differently, and human nature had to tie into that somehow, where we're still getting cool things. We're still advancing, but we're just not advancing in ways that maybe the most ideal people think we should,
Right.
So,
Well, you kind of brought like entertainment into it with VR headsets. I mean, do you think space tourism is a viable thing? Like, what if you had investors to make this spaceship to, invest in your space program? What if one of those investors was like, Hilton, or, someplace that wanted to have like a space hotel?
right.
So,
But
yeah.
there would have to be an actual demand and an interest to make it happen.
I think there is demand for space tourism. I know like Virgin Galactic is trying to do something. But to go to another planet is kind of that split into clubs and some pubs, some bars and stuff. But
yeah, they want to send
beyond that, I
people
think
to
we're kind of
Mars, and we don't even have a base on the moon yet.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
And I think the past 3 presidents have mentioned that. Like, I remember W. Bush, Bush talking about like we're building a base on the moon, and then Obama talked about it, and then now Trump's talking about like the
Tower on the moon.
Trump's casino in the moon. In the moon.
That's
talking about a
golf
space
club will be epic.
Talking about a space army, a space force. And I was just like, you do realize that every person, if like they found like a space corps of the United States Army, that all of those people are going to try to go to ranger school because they'll be actual space rangers.
It's crazy.
They'll change their name to Lightyear.
Oh Jesus!
There would be Space Marines, and then everyone would have like StarCraft themed like patches.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But see, it's like we have these ideas, we throw these out, and like there has to be some sort like an interest in it for it to actually happen. Just because
will it happen? Is that to say, will it? I mean,
at some point, it's got to happen.
At
I'd
some
say.
point, yeah.
But just because, the idealism of just we'll go to Mars because that's just what we do. It's like, yeah, we will. Just not as soon as we could. It's not really if we can. It's not really if we can do it. It's if we want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Just because the great thinkers want to do it doesn't mean the rest of the population actually has an interest in doing it. Like I said, there's more money to be made in making better VR headsets than there is to send some people to the moon. And just because Elon Musk, wants to send people to Mars, a guy who is a lot of his money is made off the government, like he is not Tony Stark making millions of dollars with what he does, making an Iron Man suit in his basement. He is a huge government contractor
who sells vaporware, like who makes who makes promises that don't ever come through to keep people's attention up.
And he's jokes very good about flamethrowers.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that was not a freaking flamethrower. That was just like a giant, butane lighter, basically. It shot a flame out that was like that. You can make one. You can make one in your house that's like an actual flamethrower, which, by the way, is not illegal. Like you can have
in some states, I'm sure.
In some states, yeah, it's not illegal in the United States, but but yeah, and you can make one. And there's people that have like tutorials, and I highly don't recommend it because there's a reason why the military got rid of flamethrowers. they're pretty dangerous.
To say the least.
The only place flamethrowers ever exist is in memes.
Yeah,
they spent some time in Nam, Yeah, I think that's where they learned their lesson. But Chris, tell me something, man. Did you always have these kind of libertarian views, or was there like a progression?
There was definitely a progression for like most of my life, or like when I was younger, not most of my life, but when I was younger in my teen years and started to be a little bit more political, I would have described myself as more of a like conservative, or I was a conservative, or and almost erring on the side of nationalist.
Sure.
I was very patriotic. I was very I believe the United States was a great, it's the greatest country in the world, which I mean, I think it's still objectively somewhat, that the case, but it was more of an idealistic standpoint. And I kind of moved into to more of a libertarian philosophy, because I saw that like struggles that people were having in business, and then also the it was kind of questioning the wars that we were getting into as well. So there was definitely, or the wars the United States was getting into, and so there was definitely a long progression over 5 years or so, to where I started kind of where I would go and I would see things and talk to some of my friends that were trying to start their own businesses, and how hard it is with the regulations and this and that, and then also seeing what the government also supports, the state also supports through their money. And it's like we brought up Elon Musk, like, and he has all this using this government money and his own money, of course, to create just like vaporware. Well, I mean, look at all of the little things that are just earmarked and under like state funding, and then take also into consideration that this money is taken from people. It is,
right.
And so it starts to just expound. And once you get into it, you start to say, well, why does it need to be this big? Like, really, it's and so I kind of got it into that, and I started reading more. I picked up The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and that was actually the first like libertarian book that I read, and it kind of moved on from there. Read David Friedman, got into F.A. Hayek, and started learning more about Austrian School of Economics and everything. Yeah, so I suppose not one thing brought me to like more of a libertarian philosophy, but it was a collection of things, and just observing, observing how the state interacts with people's lives, and understanding that it probably should be not as great. And when we talk about, like I was talking earlier about like a stateless society and all that, like it's that I understand that it's like that's a far off concept for a lot of people. It's not pragmatic, right now. And I have my ideals and what I would like to see, but where do we go now? Like what are some things that should be done now? And that's more of what I'm concerned with when talking to candidates and working with people, trying to network, is that, what are some things that some realistic goals to basically create a freer society? So things like that.
Talking about Ancapistan?
It's Ancapistan. Yeah.
So what would you like to see in, like, how are you involved in your local area, and what would you like to see?
Well, what I'm kind of involved with in my local area is that I'm getting with candidates that are running for governor, and I regularly like put my input with a couple libertarian candidates that are running for governor.
Awesome.
I'm not too involved with our county yet, and my city's local government, mostly because I have other things that I'm working on right now, and but I would like, that's in the works for me to kind of branch into, personally, branch into like my town and county governments and things like that. What are some things I would like to see, you asked? Well, I think one thing that's like on that's been kind of a common theme over the past couple of years is corporate welfare. So we were just talking about Elon Musk. So that's kind of the idea that I'm going into, where like states are doing this now. Even states that are highly agricultural are, giving money to Apple so that they can come build a, data center, which would hire 50 people, something to the tune of like $200 million of, states' money. And they're giving away money that they don't have, and to companies that won't be providing very much into the market. And that's one thing that I would like to see that kind of descaled. Another one is, of course, marijuana, but the thing is that's more of on a federal level, and mostly because of the agricultural implications in the hemp industry. I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. I don't want people to just like be able to get high, man. I'm talking about like there's more to it than that. Hemp is a very viable like agricultural resource for making textiles, and among other things. So I think that's something that's kind of something that we could see in our lifetime that could be attained.
Sure.
Yeah, and then of course lowering taxes. Lowering spending in the in all across the board, and basically providing that or reducing some of the roadblocks that stand in the way of people founding their own business to take over some of the processes that the government does. So and one example kind of this happening right now, if you look at some news going on in Lithuania, they're actually, what the government is doing, and this is pretty amazing, is the government of Lithuania is actually starting a program in which people can found their own LLCs based in a blockchain, and these people will use their company to provide what was before government services. And
Interesting.
it's kind of interesting to watch, because we're actually, seeing a government say, you know what, maybe we're not the best at this, and other people are going to, use this. And of course, they're facilitating the avenue of people to do that. But but the thing is, if you're familiar with blockchain technology, it's pretty much like it just goes. People start their own LLC, and then you don't really need to have any like maintenance, and there's no way you can manipulate it. There's literally no way that somebody can be like, well, I don't want that LLC to start. Nope, or that's not going to happen. And so that's kind of cool. So more free market solutions so that people can help other people, through their, what we talked about, their own self-interest, working with other people's interests and all that. So
yeah, fantastic, man. I mean, are you involved with you said you're involved with the governorship. Is there like a libertarian branch of the governorship out there?
Well, we have our Libertarian Party runs for, we have candidates running for offices all across the nation, and so there are candidates running for governor, governor of each state. And so in New York, for example, like Larry Sharp is running for governor, and he has some amazing ideas with what to do with the state of New York, and he's very focused on the creation of business, and he talks about like the war on Main Street, how all these businesses that, where some of them were even founded by immigrants, and they had been in people's families for years. It's like, well, the state or the city would make a law where it's like, well, your business can't exist anymore, sorry. And then it's like, well, why? And then they'll not only do that, but they'll put up a billboard outside of the business that was closed saying, oh, we're going to revitalize the community, and we're going to give back money to businesses so that they can stay. So it's like it's the broken window fallacy to the extreme.
Correct.
Just hey, we broke this window, but hey, we're going to give you money and you can fix it. And look, you had to pay the glass maker to fix this. So
stimulating the economy.
I just stimulated the economy. No, and this happens a lot. Like in some states, the roads are made with like shoddy material, or like public services, they're made to be replaced. They have planned obsolescence, and it's like, oh, we just created jobs. No, you wasted money. That's all you did. Yeah,
it's true. Well, Chris, I actually do have to run. Amos is going to continue with you for a little bit. I unfortunately have a deadline. It was good to have you on, man. It's good to connect with you. Yeah, and hopefully we'll have a chat again in the future.
Okay, absolutely. It was good to meet you.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys, have fun. Okay.
All right. And all right. Yeah, because we usually plan for about an hour and a half, and I asked him. I said, do we want to go a little longer? Because now he's joining us. But
so Amos, I have a question for you. Like, what are some things that are like, unless you wanted to go ahead, but what are some things that you see that are like, you know what, like the government doesn't need to be involved in this, and you would like to see more privatized, I guess you could say?
Well, I can see right now, I'm looking outside, roads.
Roads? You think that's the thing you want to privatize first, is roads?
I hate roads. No. just go like hardcore like the people who are against libertarians and their ideas of taxation. Just go right against them. Be like, all right, roads then. Start with roads,
because they're always like, what about the roads? Yeah,
like, all right then, roads. We'll just fix it now. One of the things I was actually I like talking about. So I was on the I was with Josh with Sarcasm and Liberty. We actually had a whole discussion about taxation, and we talked about sort of different ways taxes, like different types of ways that programs can be funded. And I threw out the idea of sort of the city, like ways that a city can basically privatize completely. So we talked about one of the things. So I basically would talk about like a streamlined process where, so I live somewhere, I pay rent, but my taxes, now my taxes go towards police, fire, all these things, typical services that we take for granted or essentially take advantage of different degrees. I said, well, what if we completely privatize how a city operates? So a city, it becomes operating like a business, actually. To the point that, so I move into his town. I call up a local agency that basically organizes this. So I'm just kind of laying out this hypothetical world. I call an agency and say, hey, my name's so-and-so. I just moved here. I live in this apartment. This is my address. What kind of packages am I looking at for basic, if you want to call like the basic citizen package or the basic, person package, whatever. And they say, okay, so we've got, basic fire, basic police, basic this, that, and the other that are offered in this town. And then I can look into it and go, okay, so we've got the Minneapolis Metropolitan Fire Service franchise. So I can buy a package from them, buy a package from the, Metropolitan Minnesota, whatever. You have all these names of franchises and companies that offer basic services.
And if you were in an apartment, you probably wouldn't get like much choice because your landlord would probably have this already set up or
right.
Something like this.
So you have the city where your money goes to a network, goes to an agency that basically helps handle all this. It's a streamlined process that handles they basically calculate in basic usage of how they even calculate risk factors. Well, insurance companies do this. When you're under 25, you have a certain rate. So because of my age, my occupation, my income, they give me the best possible plan, and I just pay that. And then we talked about how that's going to be cheaper than taxes.
In some cases, it could. Now, let's say I have a house where I don't have a fireplace. Okay, so I have naturally a less risk for. It's like how insurance companies work. If I wanted fire service, then they'd probably be like, okay, well, we'll send a guy out and we'll take, or they've already looked at my house before in the past, and I'm buying services, and then they're just like, okay, well, you have a fireplace, that's going to be like an extra $1 a month charge or something like that because you have more of a risk for fire or something like that. And then it's of course in the company's, the fire department's invested interest to make sure that a fire actually doesn't happen, because the thing is that's risk to their equipment, that's risk to their people to actually fight a fire. So it's and they're already getting paid by you to make sure that they actually come. So they're already selling their service. So
you have basically a city that prides itself on being efficient, profitable, and safe. Because there's an actual vested, capitalism has basically driven this interest to actually be that way, because it's directly between the consumer and the producer, the product. And so we talked about this, and it was such a radical kind of change with when I was talking to Josh, and I was just like, he's like, well, what if you don't get fire service? You just can't afford it for some reason. I said, well, then that's what charity is for.
Yes.
Now we're privatizing how charity works. I said, he goes, well, what if there's a fire next door and they don't have the fire plan? I said, why don't you pay for it then? He was like, well, but I said, that's what it comes down to is this, in this society with taxation, you have a million middlemen between you and dealing with the actual thing. You're paying for all this overhead. You have all this stuff going on. Instead, you create a system that is incentivized to actually be efficient and be affordable.
Right.
And actually be profitable.
Most of the cost in government is actually like administrative. It's to pay people. It's like on payroll of people to actually administrate the functions.
For how the money being, all the tax revenue that is being handled to get to where it needs to go costs so much. But what if you have agencies that are good at what they're doing? I mean, you'll just have like some sort of, local franchise agency that just handles phone calls from essentially citizens, basically calling and saying, "Hey, I just moved in here. What's my best plan?" And then they have like a way of basically taking a monthly debit from your account that sends out to these organizations to cover you. And they go, "Oh, hey, we got a new guy, lives in this street. He has this plan. We can do this."
Right.
And then maybe there'd be an interest that I want to make myself safer, or I could or if I've been safe for so long, I'm rewarded. It operates like a business. So if I'm like a person who's never had a fire, been the victim of a fire my entire life, I get a really, really good rate.
So you're basically talking like almost like a sales rep, like almost like an outside sales rep firm for like all of these companies that will provide public service.
And he said, and he was like, "Well, isn't that like another bureaucracy?" I said, "But would you rather a bureaucracy that is both profitable and efficient and voluntary and cheaper, or would you have a bureaucracy that we know just sucks?"
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Nothing you can do.
And then we even talked about this. I said, "You're actually paying for what you're using. You're not paying for things you might not use." I said, because here's the system that's different. Here's why it's so much better. You have Amos here in Minnesota, puts a 0 on his tax return, gets a certain amount of money back, but what is his tax dollar really paying for? Roads, services, and all this stuff. Right, typical. But then there's Amos in the state over, also puts a 0 on his tax return, makes the same amount of money, but he likes traveling a lot. So he's using more roads, he's using more services. There's a higher risk factor of him having to, involve services of local areas that he goes to. He's getting more of his money's worth. Well, how is that fair to either one?
Well, how is it fair to, like, if you have a guy who's super environmentally conscious and he lives close to where he works and he just rides his bicycle everywhere, like he doesn't have a car or something, like,
so he's in a sense for the taxes that he's paying into, he's probably not really getting his money's worth. But then the guy who is maybe travels a lot, he's actually maybe using more than is really can be afforded to him by what he's paying.
Or if he has 4 cars,
right?
It's like, well, you're
so I said, so it would actually change how we behave. Well, if we would actually take more ownership in what we're actually doing,
right?
And I talked about like, well, you would have some sort of a system in place where you drive to. So if you drive through a city, there would be you would have to pay like sort of like a day pass to basically cover the expense of all the services you could use on that day. So let's say I'm going to spend a day in New York City. Well, I am now an extra risk factor of something happening to me. So I go in there, I pay a day pass, which is also going to be cheap, because with these systems, cities could become more profitable and more efficient. So having tourism would actually be in their best interest, and being cheap and affordable to visit would be another interest.
Right.
So
absolutely.
I go into New York and I pay $1 for the day.
Yeah, or something like that.
Or something, to pay for everything. So I'm paying what I'm using and I'm saving money, and basically it's more efficient that way. You're having a proper means to run society, basically.
Right. And a lot of like some of the contention of like private ownership of roads that I've heard is that like, well, you're going to have like, thousands of companies that like, how are you going to pay all these companies? Well, of course. Okay. That's a question and that could be provided by basically a service. So the people who handle these packages, you could be like, well, I don't really travel more than 200 miles away from my house. And they're like, okay, well, here's a 200-mile, and this could all be done through an app, for crying out loud. You just have like, here's a 200-mile radius and you pay a solid rate. And they, of course, basically like distribute that money to people around. I'm just saying one way that it could be done. It's probably better ways, but to those companies that own the roads, and then they get paid, and they didn't have to do anything.
Right.
They probably are paying a fee to this company that does it so that they can provide a free service to the potential customer. But
right.
and then you pay a flat fee, and then if you go outside of that, then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to take a trip. Maybe highways are done off of a like a fast pass, or like you have like a little chip on your window, and so you go through like toll points, and it's just like an overhanging thing, and it just scans the car and then charges you like, oh, you're entering this road, and then it's like it's $2
Right.
to drive on this, or something.
Google what you would put in Google Maps to go somewhere, and it would tell you this is how much this trip will cost you.
Yeah. And then you're like, yeah, stuff like that. And then, but the thing is, like, most people, like with roads, it's supposedly paid through by like with gas taxes and things like that. So a lot of people would argue like, well, it is a usage fee because of course you're using more gas. But we get back to the point where that's an insane like bureaucracy to do that, and a system that's not concerned by like cutting waste. They're not concerned by saying, well, if we hire less people or we make this more efficient, it's going to save money in the long run. Some governments might, state governments might be more concerned with that than others, but it's a thing where it's like they hire more public employees than they can, politicians can put it to people like, I've created jobs, vote for me. It's just like
the whole thing with it comes on to any like government organization that I really like hear more in depth about how they handle things, where their funding comes from. All you ever really hear is just how can they get more funding? How can construction workers that fix city streets get more funding? How can the Department of Education get more funding to teachers? And it's like there's always more funding, but you never hear more like how can we make them better? Well, more money. It's like no. More incentives, more reason to be better.
Right.
There has to be. It's kind of back to that question of sort of the ideal is teachers should just enjoy what they do. That can only go so far before their bills come in and they're like there's no real incentive. They're in that mentality that, well, just the unions and the money and Department of Education. There was no Department of Education way back when.
Right.
We were just fine. Teachers were all right, but now you just hear about
not even way back when. That was only like 1972, I think, is when the Department of Education.
I hear a lot of them. They'll say, like my parents grew up in a world where there was no Department of Education, but then when you change it, they think, well, then it's just going to be a bunch of like corporations, and they're all corporation-y, and
then don't send your kid to that school.
Right, and
yeah,
but
you have a choice.
But then you show them like, you show them these companies that are these services that we have. It's like, well, if you send a letter somewhere through the post office, it's what, 40 some cents. Mm-hmm. Well, does it get there on time? Is it guaranteed? Do you get a refund? Then you look at the private company that does it. Well, you can get a letter to somewhere maybe for like a few bucks more, but it's going to get there quick. And now you look at, but then it can go, the price can be lowered even further if more people were, like if the post office disappeared overnight, I think UPS and FedEx would probably become cheaper.
Yes, probably, because the thing is they would anticipate that there's somebody that's going to come in and pick up where they left off, and we're going to have actual market competition now, and so we should lower prices to be competitive. It's just like any other product or service.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, if if your mom and pop pizza shop is competing with the local Domino's, well, Domino's is cheaper because more people go there. But your mom and pop shop is trying to get more customers. Let's say Domino's disappeared. Your mom and pop shop's going to get a whole lot more customers, and they could probably lower their prices a bit.
Yeah, probably.
Because they can sort of afford to hire more people, be more efficient. There has to be some sort of an interest. So in the same way, this idea of the sort of the city as a business, and it's not just like, Minneapolis has the fire department business. You would probably have a franchise of fire departments that supply fire services.
You would have competition within fire services.
Right. Yeah. And then what's even better is these fire services are going to do so much, but they're going to be competing not only for packages, services, but also efficiency. So your fire service is probably going to get there a whole lot faster in the private world than this public domain of, there's parts of the city, like Detroit. Mm-hmm. Police service takes, I think they say, like getting the police to you is like 20 minutes on average.
Well, that's if they actually come too.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
What is the interest of them actually performing well? Is there really an interest? Police, because there's all this talk of, police and stuff, but if you have a security service
that is directly interested in like their customers, because they will not get paid if they don't. The person will cancel their subscription. It's just like the idea between, like, why is the Wall Street Journal so trusted for like business news? Why?
Because it has an interest to do so.
Exactly, because it's a subscription-based newspaper. Why is our Netflix shows so good compared to stuff that's on network TV? Because they have an invested interest in producing good shows that people are going to like, so that they don't cancel Netflix. It's things like that. So
they can work outside of the FCC.
Oh, that's true too.
Yeah, and so you look at these different areas of our lives that we take for granted, and we think about, that's just how it is. But when you look at it, like, well, what if there was an actual interest to actually like be good beyond idealism? Just like why is it more viable for asteroid mining than it is to go to Mars?
Yeah, right.
I know we're going back to that, but why is there more of an interest to create, there's an interest to create faster internet nowadays versus getting free. I mean, unfortunately, the idealists would say, well, we can just get internet to the third world. We could, but there's probably more money to be made in creating higher speed internet in the first world. Different interests, but that same interest could create a desire for people to be charitable, to bring internet to the third world.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if we get look at it this way, if we have faster, a service provides faster internet, and it's not much more expensive than people are willing to pay for it, especially like businesses and things like that that really rely on fast internet, then and people start buying that, well, then it kind of, the internet company before that has the slower internet was just like, well, shoot, how are we gonna, we'll see if we can cut costs somewhere. And then they all start kind of driving costs down or getting better at what they do. And then so eventually, like when you're talking about, well, bringing internet to the third world, it's just like, well, an ISP, the outdated ISP goes under, and it's just a church or a charity goes, maybe we can pick that up. And then they start, they could start, bringing internet to the third world by, basically, using this, like picking up this old ISP. I'm just brainstorming, anything could happen. And, the man, man cannot foresee his own advance. I can't predict what
the thing with this free market that I find so interesting is when things start to become streamlined. we have these cities, we have these services. They're all they're like, 90+% of every service we know about is pretty much privatized. You have like very, very, minarchist society.
Mm-hmm.
And is there really going to be much debt?
Like,
I mean, companies are just going to be basically focused on profits. Does our government really focus on profit?
well, I mean, if they want more profit, they can just take it.
But I mean, we actually have a national debt
Mm-hmm.
that we are not paying off. But
Right.
when you see businesses, small businesses, big businesses, they have debts too, but they're paying them off.
They have a plan to pay them off, and they have to have projected growth.
And then when they're paid off,
yeah.
they can have an interest to maybe take out a loan to expand, or they have cash reserves to make the expansion without taking much of a loan. What does our U.S. government do? Raise the debt ceiling, basically raising our credit limit.
Yes.
I've applied it. When you apply the numbers, trying to kind of shrink them down to scale, so I'm just going to say I'm not going to say where I live, but where I live now, I pay $660 a month for rent. And I have certain, budgets, I have expenses, bills, and such. And you apply those numbers. So let's say, and I make, what do I think my take home, I make a gross of like $45,000 a year anyways. So I make that amount of money, and I'm applying that, and it's like I make that much, but you apply that to how the government spends. It's like I'm spending like $60,000 a year every year.
Right.
And then I go to the bank and go, and somehow they keep raising my credit limit.
Well, yeah, it's just like if you had
and I'm only paying the absolute bare minimum of interest.
Right.
I'm not actually, because when you pay on a credit card, you're actually making a dent on the principal amount. But with the U.S. government, they're only paying the interest.
Right. And sometimes not even that. And I was going to use the example of a credit card. Like if you ran up your credit card debt and then said, well, I'd like a new credit card with, a higher limit. That's not how that works. Like what company is going to give you a...
Banks don't do that.
Yeah, banks don't do that.
And we bailed out the banks.
Well, credit card companies don't do that. They're just like, no, you owe us $30,000, and it just keeps getting bigger. And you keep spending more. We're not going to give you a credit card with a...
They eventually sue you and garnish your wages.
Yeah. It's just like, no, pay us. Like you owe us money, but that the government does that all the time. How is it right for them?
But we're creating jobs.
No, you're wasting money.
We're creating parks.
Well, oh yeah, and then that's another thing, like privatization of the parks.
I mean, I think you could
Ron Swanson talks about it.
You could make a meme on that and say, "What if they built a roller coaster going through the Grand Canyon?"
Parks and Rec. Ron Swanson. He's like, I want all parks to be privatized. Look at feed the ducks, pay a nickel. Look at some birds, pay a nickel. Go down the slide, pay a nickel.
But could you imagine if they made like the world's, so like you privatize like the Grand Canyon and they build like the world's largest roller coaster going down and up and
think
like a hole in the ground.
Like think about this though, like why do people go see the Grand Canyon? Why would people go see the Grand Canyon? Because of its natural, majestic beauty. They want to see that. So if it was owned by a private company, it's in their invested interest to maintain that.
Right.
To have it be natural and not put a roller coaster in it.
Oh, dang it.
We can't put a roller coaster next to it. Put a roller coaster next to it, like, in a open field, and then be like the Grand Canyon roller coaster. And then you could have it a Grand Canyon amusement park next to it, away from it. so that people can go see the Grand Canyon and it's still there, and it's
Pay a nickel.
Yeah, pay a nickel. Look at the Grand Canyon, pay a nickel. Yeah, something like that.
Right. So, what do you like? I guess would you, with all these new with these new so in all these public services that are now privatized, do you think you would work for any of those companies?
For a private fire department?
Yeah.
Sure, why not? I mean, if I really wanted to be a firefighter.
Right.
Yeah.
Would there,
But
because that would open up a whole.
Do you think I would work for them after they were private, as opposed, like, if I really wanted to be a firefighter, but I didn't want to work for a public
now
services?
there would be there would be some sort of economic incentive to actually work for what used to be public services. Because in my job, I've come across a lot of different people, and I've actually spoken to policemen and stuff. And in Minnesota, what the problem with police is, there's a huge shortage of police officers in town and cities all over the place. But the problem with it is they don't get paid enough. First off, Minnesota prides itself on having a lot of requirements to become a police officer. So most other states, you do 2-year police academy, you be a cop. Minnesota wants you to go through a 4-year degree, a whole bunch of training to be a police officer. But on top of that, they don't get paid that much either. And when you do actually get in, you are not you're just overwhelmed with work. It's,
right.
Towns that have tens of thousands of people. So there's I think I've told you, Mankato here. Mankato, that's ways from me, is 50,000 people, 60 police officers, I think is what I heard. And,
oh, wow.
And so you have like MSU there, Mankato State, with all the football games and stuff. And riots can break out, just disturbances, and you got 60 police officers. So they're calling cops from the cities to come down to help out. And the city is obviously overwhelmed all the time too. So there's no incentive. There's no real reason to actually want to get into this job. But then I think if you turn into somewhat of a privatized system, you have
well, you could have different companies fulfilling different roles. So you could have one company that's doing like a general patrolling and just patrolling and response. You could have another, and then you have another company that could do. You could kind of like partitionize it to different things. Maybe one is more of a tactical response team, tactical response company, and for that stadium might need that service, or different venues, music venues or something like that, where if a riot breaks out or something like that, they might need a riot response bunch company.
Of dudes with shields.
Yeah, the bunch of dudes with shields, that come, break up the fight and break up the riot and things like that. And so you're kind of, the point with that is it's like you're taking people that have very specific skills in those areas, and then they are able to tailor made the service. But also, you don't have all of this under like a giant umbrella that's trying to be all managed by kind of a central authority, and trying to deal with all of everything that comes from every angle. So it's kind of does it leave a little bit more of a responsibility on the actual customer itself? Probably. But for people who, like, the companies that own the roads or something like that, then they hire, this patrol officer company to make sure that people obey the speed limit, or, certain, obey the the rules
I
that they
think would
have.
be interesting is now you have these security, basically privatized security firms. What they will do is what they would do as an equivalent to an arrest. So they arrest someone. They basically, let's say they detain someone who has been caught in a riot or some sort of, let's say in these events, these football games.
Mm-hmm.
What they'll do is they say, okay, what's your name? So they basically find out who they are, and they go, okay, this is going to be so they could create some sort of like a point system. Well, you're a higher risk factor in our security, as in your security profile. So the local security firm is going to mark up your security package.
Yeah,
because you're a security risk. Whereas what the equivalent to that is a record.
Right. You would have,
but you don't pay more taxes if you have a record.
Right.
Or pay less taxes if you're a safe individual.
And like, let's take, for example, like, you're a certain individual is in a riot at a music venue or something like that. And then the riot response force is called, and then like they detain this person, they get their information. And then that's put on like a record that's maintained with like security companies to be like, hey, watch out for this guy. But then what happens after that? They're not sent to prison. That company was concerned with protecting the assets of their customer that hired them, so that person leaves, and of course they probably get blacklisted from the music venue too, and say like, you can't ever come back.
Right. And see, these are the kind of, they're just it's different ways we're preventing people from committing violence. Now, I think the time where like the minarchist government would really step in is if there's actual breach of like, okay, you killed someone.
Oh yeah.
Then they would say, okay, we're going to detain this person. So the company would detain the person and hand them over to maybe like the extreme, like minimum, prison system that would probably still exist.
I think we're kind of talking about somewhere like in between like minarchist and ANCAP, because a lot of minarchists would say that no, police should be a publicly funded like service.
I think there would be something, but a majority of, so like you were talking about riots, so like riots, fights, disturbances, things like that could be handled by the private side. The absolute worst where someone is like, maybe there should be some sort of threshold or like some like maybe extreme high level white collar crime, or like killing someone. Or maybe even or like mortally wounding someone to the point that like now the security force can't really just, because the security force can do things to incentivize a person to behave, but they can't really do much. So there would have to be maybe some sort of part where, okay, this person is an actual threat to people's lives. They've killed someone. We're beyond what we're allowed to do with sort of breaching on his rights. So we're going to that's, I guess, would be the slight, like, it wouldn't be a monopolization of force from the government, but it would be like, okay, when it comes to the absolute worst, the government's going to take over.
How do you keep it within that realm though? That's the thing. Like,
Second Amendment.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a great reduction of where the government steps in, because the government is now arresting anyone.
I agree with you. It's probably better than what we have now.
It's
freer than what we have now.
It'd be a step, and then when we get there and we're used to that, maybe then we start to solve, okay, how do we solve the murderer problem? Do we still transfer it over to the government, or do we transfer it over, like, and then who's to, like, who keeps the security firms in check? I mean, yes, there's an interest to behave properly, but there could be shady, there's always the possibility of shady shit going on.
Well, I think like it's just like, shady shit, like backdoor stuff, like kind of like, but stuff that people don't really know about. It's kind of in the backdrop is what you're saying. Like,
yeah, there could always be like people that pay off security firms to do different things.
True. But generally, generally now, like the way the world is now, if stuff like that happens, like, oh, hey, this celebrity paid this person off, it generally, like, a lot of that stuff comes to light, and people kind of know about it. And with this, it's like, if we've find out that like, well, politician like paid off some DA to make a different ruling, or like, celebrity was able to, whatever it may be, we can't just say, well, I'm boycotting that security company now. I'm not going to pay for their services anymore. I'm going to buy, instead of ABC, I'm going to buy XYZ security. But we can't do that now. Like, there's no choice between like what you buy. And so, cause you're just paying for it. Sorry.
Right.
But yeah.
Huh. Well, we didn't quite talk about too much on the actual monopolization of government.
Well, we kind of, feel like we kind of got back around to it,
we've kind of talked about. I mean, it's such a complicated issue when you talk about like what is it? I mean, when I talk to different people about, like trying to explain the libertarian view, and talking about different kinds of libertarians, the ANCAPs, the libertarians, the more, the center right. There's all these beliefs, and how the left and the right, how they debate, policies, taxation, and stuff. I think it just really comes down to the main question: is what do you believe the role of government is?
Me personally?
Well, it just in general, though, for people in general, like there's always different ideas of what is the role of government. Is the role of government like, you can have the more basic sense of just like national defense, like, so like a sort of a minarchist libertarian type would maybe say like national defense, like just defending the country. That's it. They're not internal, defending sort of from outside forces, courts. That's about it. Defending our rights, contracts.
I think I kind of look at it this way. It's like the what is the role of government? Well, the two main sides of the equation here, between the Republicans and the Democrats or liberals and conservatives will argue that, well, no, the role of government should be this. And then the liberal will say the role of government should be this. And then they're always butting heads. But the libertarian, calmly and coolly, says, how can we have people be involved in the creation of their own destiny? How can we foster that more than more than be concerned on what ways should the state prevent it? Stuff like that. I feel like that's kind of the libertarians, when we talk about like talking to each other, minarchists, classical liberals, anarcho-capitalists, anarcho-syndicalists, or wherever you stand on that spectrum. I feel like when we talk about it amongst ourselves, we have kind of the same goal in mind of where we want people to be able to craft their own destiny, start their own businesses, achieve more without the government being in their lives, rather than arguing about the ways that government should be concerned with people's lives.
Either your leftist probably is believing like, well, the government is supposed to take care of us.
Yes.
And then your right leaning is like, well, they're supposed to take, like, not so much take care of us, but keep us safe.
Right.
But then that gets turned into, hey, they're not looking too friendly across that ocean over there. and I this is like another thing too. I've talked to some people about like this whole Syria thing, and it's like, I am the libertarian that doesn't like talking too much about foreign policy because there's just so much stuff with that. And so I kind of just go, we should help where we're needed. But then again, what if like someone is actually doing something shitty across the ocean, breaching on human rights? If someone is if genocide is being committed somewhere, should we interfere? And because in cases where we have, it has turned out worse.
In some cases.
Yeah, and in our interests kind of get changed. We gave weapons to the Taliban to fight the Russians. Now the Taliban came back and are attacking us. when we're over there. But then we're like, okay, remove the Taliban, and then ISIS pops up because of us, and then and then we want to like try to fight them, and then there's this whole, and then Syria jumps into the equation somehow, and then they apparently gassed their own people, and then we don't really know if that really happened, but gassing is never okay in war, like, so we want to step in and do something about that, and then we're like, what the heck? I don't know. That's my conflict with it, is like, and then you kind of have the pure like anti-war in all scenarios libertarians. And then it's like, I understand why, like, pacifism is definitely a good thing for markets. People not dying is definitely good. But we're just humans.
Right, and people do bad things sometimes.
Yeah, countries do really bad things sometimes. And it's like, so do we interfere? Do we just set an example? Like, America, I think, is too deep in being involved with the world that we can't just completely pull back.
Well, I mean, like all at once, very drastically. I think it would set a different. I think it would have to be a gradual thing. To be like, you know what, there's places we could shut down our military bases and it would probably be just fine. Maybe Japan, different places around the world where it can just be like, you know what, let's kind of get out of here and, focus on other things, focus on, actually protecting from invasion, or, focusing on information gathering and things like that instead. So I think it would have to be a gradual progression instead of just being like, no, we're done, we're leaving. So,
right.
Yeah.
But we're actually hitting at about a little over 2 hours now. I know we had to lose Brooke there for a sec, but I guess
I came on late, so
yeah, all those technical difficulties.
Yeah.
So I added a couple of things in the description, basically referring everyone to your Twitter, all of the websites that I could find. But then again, you have the Steam It and Minds accounts. I'm going to add those. Also, I think I might as well add the SoundCloud, because that's where you guys have the podcast, right?
Yeah, it's the Think Liberty Network on SoundCloud, and we try to put one out, a podcast out twice a week, and there's also the Liberty on the Rocks program where we have guests on William Gadsden has guests on the show, and they drink scotch and talk about a libertarian author. And so that's kind of cool. Steam It, our Steam It account is just think-liberty, and then on Minds it is think_liberty, and you can find us on there. So
how much of a, compared to other, because there's all these, whatever liberty, there's Think Liberty, there's Learn Liberty, there's how much of a reach have you guys figured, how much of a reach you guys have within the libertarian community?
Oh yeah, we have, there's different ways that you can use to gauge, like through SoundCloud and things like that, and then of course likes on Facebook and things like that. Definitely we've been noticed by people within the party, and we have kind of an influence with some of the other people that run different pages even on Facebook, and we're starting to get more of a reach even on, like, Facebook was where we started, and that's kind of our main focus. So we're still kind of a small page and still picking up steam, but we're trying to put out content on a regular basis, so and try to build that up. But so
yeah, like I said, everyone watching, all the links are going to be below, as well as our links for Brooke and I. But we're going to kind of wrap it up here. If you guys have any questions, you can definitely tweet at me at Amos Joe or at Brook_Potter on Twitter. Also connect with Chris, as well as all the people connected with him at Think Liberty. Check out their stuff. And hopefully we will see them in the future. Like I said, like, comment, and subscribe, guys, to the channel as well as Brooke's channel as well. And let us know in the comments. Have a discussion. So thanks, everyone, for joining us on the Shitlord Preachers. We will see you next week.